I want to talk about is the economic development model and how it's changing. When I was growing up in Alabama, our economic development model, basically for rural Alabama, was let's just widen all the highways. That was our model. And then we widened the highways and lined them with a bunch of junk. Okay, that was our model. Okay, well, let's think about that. You know, it used to be everything was about, shotgun recruitment, low-cost positioning. It was about cheap land, cheap gas, cheap labor. And, it was about, chasing and trying to get some factory or plant or distribution center to move to your community. Quality of life really didn't matter. And yes, the most important infrastructure investment was roads. Today, that's all changing because the economy of the United States is changing. Today, it's not about shotgun recruitment, it's about laser recruitment. It's not about low-cost positioning, it's about high-value positioning. It's not about what you don't have, it's about what you do have. Quality of life is critically important in an economy where capital is footloose. People can locate a business anywhere in the world today. So quality of life becomes a differentiator. And today, the most important infrastructure investment is education. One of the things that we've got to get right is the relationship between our education and the jobs that exist in those markets. And in many places, they're not in alignment. And so aligning our, for example, community college curriculums and the available jobs, that's pretty important today. So economic development, like everything else, is about choices. Do you want to invest downtown? Do you want to invest more out on the strip? And as I said last night also, I don't think that happy face really makes that better. Or, do you want to try to recruit new industry? Or do you want to try to expand the industries that you already have? Well, that's an important question because we have 25,000 American communities competing against each other for like 400 new plants, factories, or distribution centers we build anymore in America every year to do anything. So how many communities are really going to be successful in that competition? So part of successful economic development today is thinking about what you do have. And it's rarely about the one big thing. For years we had this idea that economic development was all about the copycat logic of competition, and we build the one big thing. So first it was the arms race to build the largest convention center in America. Well, I can tell you that Knoxville, Tennessee will never win that arms race. You can triple the size of your convention center, and then they'll quadruple the size of the one in Atlanta and Chicago and Las Vegas. And then it was festival marketplaces, which worked fine in Boston and Baltimore, but they went bankrupt in 19 other cities. Toledo, Jacksonville, Norfolk, Richmond. So it was like everybody had it. Then, we opened in Birmingham. We decided we had to have, no private company would come and open an amusement park in Birmingham, like Six Flags over Atlanta. So the city of Jefferson County decided to spend $75 million building a new amusement park called Vision Land. It was bankrupt in 3 years. The county had to buy it back for $12 million. Ended up selling it again for $3 million. Okay? The one big thing. And then it was aquariums. Okay, so because they have a great aquarium in Atlanta and Baltimore and Boston, everybody had to we got to have an aquarium. And, even Camden, New Jersey said if we could just build an aquarium costing $75 million that would feature the fish of New Jersey, little brown fish with lesions. No, I'm just kidding about that. But they said if we could build that aquarium, and they did build that aquarium. It's a very nice aquarium. Did it save Camden? No, it did not. Because successful economic development is rarely about the one big thing. It's almost always about lots of little things working synergistically together off of a plan that makes sense for you and your community. Roberta Gratz, who's one of the best writers on urban redevelopment, says successful cities think small in a big way. It's about all the things working together synergistically that make sense for you and your community. Now, some of us call that asset-based economic development. It means really analyzing what you already have and then building on those things. Inventorying your assets, and then you build your plans, whether it's an economic development plan, a land use plan, a tourism plan, around the assets that you already have. You enhance them, and I'll show you some examples of that later on. Demographics. I mean, You need to be studying demographics the way stockbrokers study the market. Because success in the world today is about getting in front of the inevitable. And I can tell you that the world is changing because the demographics are changing. We're getting older, we're getting younger, we're getting more diverse. Today, the largest majority of American families have no school-age children. You know, we were talking about this last night. It's true in Knoxville like it is in every other city. What's the percentage here in Knoxville, Mark?
Plus or minus 2%.
Plus or minus 2% of that number. Okay? The fastest growing household form in the United States is a single person living alone. Okay? The second largest family form is two people living together, no children. Okay? Well, have we been building housing for single people and young couples and retirees and empty nesters and young professionals living together, etc.? No. For about 25 years, we built all our houses like every single family in America was the Waltons. The mom, the dad, the two kids, and the dog. So today, we have an oversupply of large single-family homes in every market in America, and an undersupply of everything else. We don't have enough multifamily housing, attached housing, cottage housing, pocket neighborhoods, downtown housing, small lot housing, everything else. This is today's issue of USA Today. That is more people live in the city. The fact is, and this article talks about this, today, for the first time in 50 years, a majority of American cities are growing faster than their surrounding cities. And why? Because of skill. Because the two largest cohorts in American history are baby boomers, my generation, and our children, the Gen Y generation, all moving fast. But youngsters want to live in the action. They want to be in the country. You know what the fastest growing form of transportation in the United States is today? Bicycling. Who would have thought? Young people are moving to major metropolitan areas. They pick a city they want to live in. They move there. Then they look for a job. Technology, the death of distance. You can run a business everywhere in the world today. So, if you can't differentiate Knoxville from any other community, you have no competitive advantage. Eds and meds. The biggest industry in 60 of the 100 largest cities in America today is a university or a hospital. I grew up in Birmingham. What was the biggest industry in Birmingham when I was growing up? U.S. Steel. Today, U.S. Steel is gone. The biggest employer in the state of Alabama is the University of Alabama Medical Center. 27 hospitals right in downtown Birmingham. But we still keep doing infrastructure investments like we think we need to build another outer beltway around Birmingham to move the trucks that don't exist anymore. It's not really doing anything to help the biggest industry, which is right in downtown Birmingham. Give you an example of quality of life and economic development. Foster Freeze, I don't know how many people have heard of Foster Freeze. He was one of Mitt Romney's most prominent supporters in the recent presidential campaign. He owns a mutual fund company called the Brandywine Investment Group, and this company, which was founded by his father, was headquartered in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, about 40 years ago. And Valley Forge is a very busy suburb of Philadelphia. But Foster Freeze, he likes to fly fish. So he'd fly out to Jackson, Wyoming every summer to go fly fishing for a couple of weeks. And then one day, he's just stuck in traffic on the Schuylkill Expressway outside of Philadelphia, and all of a sudden, boom, light bulb goes on in his mind. He says, hey, I can run a mutual fund company anywhere in the world. He picks up his entire company and moves it into downtown Jackson, Wyoming. That's the largest private sector employer in Jackson today. He's not there because of low taxes and regulatory relief. He's there because of access to outdoor recreation. Who would have thought that that was an economic development driver? You know, it's interesting. Montana State University did a study of all the new businesses, every single one that had moved to the 3 Montana counties that abut Yellowstone National Park over a 5-year period, and asked them why they lived there, why they moved there. It's everything from manufacturing to professional services, you name it. The number one reason was because of the beauty of the region. Number 2 was because it was a good place to raise a family. Number 3 was access to outdoor recreation. Now think about that. So if you'd gone to the commissioners of Bozeman County, Montana, like 10 years ago and said, you need to do anything to protect the beauty of the region, like pass a sign ordinance, for example, oh, they would have said, oh, you can't do that because that's bad for business. Turns out it's exactly the opposite. Nothing could be better for business than protecting the beauty of a region. Consumer attitudes are changing. This is a front page story from USA Today. It's about the fact that Americans, the average amount of time that American spends in a shopping center or an enclosed mall has been going down for years. People go to buy what they want and they leave. And so, that's changing the way we think about retail. And then sort of this idea of market supply-demand imbalance. The old one-size-fits-all model, whether it's in residential development or commercial development, simply doesn't work in a world where there's so many different groups of people who want different things. And so you can't just keep doing the same old, same old. You got to think a little more creatively. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think there are 4 major economic development imperatives. One is talent, education. I talked about that. Young people with college degrees are clustering in certain areas. Raleigh, Durham, Austin, Texas, Seattle, Washington, D.C. So it used to be, when I got out of college many years ago, college graduates were evenly distributed throughout the United States based on population density. We had pretty much the same percentage everywhere. That's no longer true. So in the greater Washington area, as an example, 47% of everybody has a college degree or higher. But in West Virginia, it's 18%. And by the way, every county in West Virginia except one is losing population today because the young people are leaving. Same is true in many other places in America as well. So, think about what would attract and retain young people. Innovation, the willingness to take risks, the ability to generate new ideas. Venture capital, self-employment, small business, risk-taking. Connectivity. Connectivity today is not about, road connectivity. It's about internet connectivity, connection to ideas and other people. It's about travel. It's about civic involvement. It's about having places where people can actually get together easily. And there's the topic I want to talk the most about, the relationship between economic development and placemaking, distinctiveness. This is from a report done by the CEOs for cities. They say the unique characteristic of place may be the only truly defensible source of competitive advantage for cities and regions. You've heard this slogan, keep Austin weird. Or some people say, keep Knoxville scruffy. Well, what this really is about, it means keep you on the cutting edge, keep you different, unique, unusual. Because once again, it's not just a funny slogan, it's about building on your own assets, et cetera, et cetera. So here's how the realtors put it. They say a community's appeal drives economic prosperity. And let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So let's take a community's front door, its gateway. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important, and a bad first impression is hard to change. Do you think you'd rather visit the town of Franklin, Virginia, or would you rather go to the town of Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks more like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one looks more like a community you would rather invest time or money in? If you don't remember anything else I say this morning, remember this. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to invest, where to vacation, where to retire, based on what America's communities look like. What they look like. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's take tourism. Tourism is important because it is the biggest industry in the world. It's the first, second, or third largest industry in every single American state. Okay, so here's the official travel guide for the state of Oregon. I don't know if you can read it in the back, but it says their slogan is, Oregon, things look different here. Can you imagine a state brochure, travel brochure that said, like, Tennessee, things look the same here? Well, of course not, because what is tourism? Tourism is about visiting places that are different, unusual, and unique. The more any town in Tennessee comes to look like every place else, the less reason there is to visit. On the other hand, the more a community does to enhance its uniqueness, whether it's natural or cultural or architectural, historical, whatever, the more reason there is to visit. If every place was just like every place else, there'd be no reason to go any place. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. Here's a new publication just put out by the World Bank. It's called The Economics of Uniqueness. And they make the point that I've already made, is that if you can't differentiate yourself, you're going to have no competitive advantage. Sameness is a minus in the world we live in today. It is not a plus. So build on what makes Knoxville unique and different. And you know, yes, community character does matter. It's always mattered. Mark Twain said, you know, we take stock of a city like we take stock of a man. The clothes or appearance are the externals by which we judge. And sometimes people say to me, well, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, you really think that's true? Do you really think that that scenic view has less economic value than this scenic view? Let me read you what the leading real estate appraisers in the United States say about this topic. I'm going to sit down, by the way, because I'm orthopedically challenged. So that's why I've got this stool here, so please excuse me. So let me just read you this. Here's what they say about this. They say, quote, you can put a dollar value on a view. Scenic landscapes are an economic asset, not just because you and I think they're nice, but because other people are willing to pay to see the view and to experience the unique character of a place. They go on to say, quote, housing, hotels, offices with scenic views always command premium prices. The better the view, the higher the price. You know, the scenic landscapes of eastern Tennessee have quantifiable economic value, which is one of the reasons why we ought to be trying to preserve more of these landscapes. So, you know, here's another example. So the home builders back in 1994 were doing a study, and they were trying to figure out what would add value to a house more than anything else. Was it like having a, you know, Viking stove, or, you know, a 3-car garage, or, you know, a fancy kitchen with granite countertops? You know, what was it? Well, here's what they found. Quote, the surrounding environment is the single most important factor affecting the market value of a home. A mountain vista or proximity to a park, water, or green space affects the value of a home more than the size of the house, the number of rooms, the type of appliances, or even the presence of a swimming pool. The surrounding environment. It's what realtors call location, location, location. So, you know, yes, there are literally hundreds of studies that show that green space increases the value of adjacent property. So where's the most valuable land in all of New York State? Well, there it is. It's the land next to Central Park. You know, it's interesting. We have a lot of green space developments in America. We call them golf course developments. We have about 15,000 of them, and our members, the development community, started to build golf course developments many years ago because they figured out that they could charge a lot premium, anywhere from 10 to 25% for a house next to a golf course, over and above the exact same house not next to a golf course. But what we've come to find out is that the vast majority of people who buy in golf course developments do not play golf. And you ask them, well, why'd you buy the house there? They say, oh, well, I like the view across the fairway. I like to live next to protected open space. Well, what does it cost to build a golf course? Millions of dollars. What does it cost to maintain a golf course? Millions of dollars. What does it cost to leave the open space alone in the first place? Like almost nothing. And by the way, what is the most popular form of outdoor recreation in America? It is not golf. It is walking for pleasure. Number one most popular form of outdoor recreation. I want to say a little bit about historic preservation. Why is it important to save East Tennessee's historic buildings, neighborhoods, and landscapes?
Well, let's talk about first principles. Some of you have read Thomas Wolfe's novels, Homeward Angel, and certainly know that he's the guy who penned the immortal line, "You cannot go home again." And sadly, Tom Wolfe can't go home again to his original house, but here it is in this parking lot in Knoxville, North Carolina. Why is historic preservation important? Because first and foremost, ladies and gentlemen, these are the places that physically connect us to the past. These are the places that tell us who we are and where we came from. Daniel Webster once said, quote, "The man who feels no sentiment or veneration for the memory of his forefathers is himself unworthy of kindred regard and memory." At its essence, saving the historic buildings of Tennessee is about saving the heart and soul of Tennessee. But it's also incredibly important to your economic well-being as well. Let me give you a few examples. This used to be the fire station in a small town in southern Indiana, Madison, Indiana. It became obsolete as a fire station. The guy bought it and turned it into a pizza parlor. And like so many small towns in America, this was a town going downhill. Until they brought in something called the Main Street program, a very powerful tool for downtown revitalization. They started working with the owners of downtown buildings to restore their facades. And they did that. Told a story about the history of the building. But guess what else happened? The sales of pizza almost doubled. Saying that over a multi-year period. So let me give you a couple of nationally famous examples. Welcome to New Orleans. Okay? So this is the French Quarter, obviously. I got to work in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, put together a redevelopment plan for the city, and of course we wanted to know what are the biggest industries. But they didn't want just a physical redevelopment plan, they wanted an economic redevelopment plan. So we said, what's your biggest industry? The seafood industry, the sugar industry, the chemical industry, the oil industry? No, none of those. The biggest industry in the entire state of Louisiana is the sugar industry. And what's the engine of that industry? American. And yet, did you know that the state of Louisiana for almost 40 years wanted to put blue water today, they understand that this is more important and more valuable than any plant factor or distribution center in the entire state of Louisiana. Slowly. Let's go to San Antonio, Texas. That's where San Antonio really was. That's the number one destination in the entire state of Texas. It's the basis for that city's multi-billion-dollar a year annual tourism industry. The city of San Antonio. Most people don't know, though, is that one point the San Antonio thought so little of that small river. We actually went to the country back to the today. Let's fly to Seattle and visit the Pike Place Farmers Market, the number one destination in the state of Washington. You go to Seattle, that's what you remember. The state view of the Pike Place Market, the sunshine, and not raining. But yet, about 30 years ago, a couple of people on the city council of Seattle seriously tried to demolish that place. Why? They said, oh, we don't want no downtown parking. That's parking in the world of life. We have all the parking in the world, but nothing to do with it. Now they love individual parking. That's not proverb says, without vision, the people will perish. Try to imagine a corporation that didn't have a business plan. Well, they would have a very hard time finding new investors. They'd have a very hard time growing because no one would know where they were going. Successful communities build their visions around their existing assets. And then successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. Successful communities consider what they look like. Successful communities pick and choose among development proposals. All development is not created equal. Some development will make Knoxville a better place to live in, look at, work in, visit. Some won't. The biggest impediment to better development in small cities, particularly in the South, ladies and gentlemen, is a fear of saying no to anything. Well, if you're afraid to say no to anything, you will get the worst of everything. Communities that set no standards or low standards will simply compete to the bottom. Communities that set high standards compete to the top because they know if you say no to bad development, that is adverse to your vision for the future, you will always get better development in its place. So let me give you a few examples. Everybody's heard of what Chattanooga has happened to Chattanooga. So when I was growing up in Birmingham, we used to make fun of Chattanooga. I mean, that really tells you something. You know, it was called a patch of rust in the Sun Belt, voted the most polluted city in America, now known as an international model for sustainable development. And you know, their vision began with something called Chattanooga Venture. They decided to focus on two things: downtown Chattanooga, because that's the heart and soul of any community, and the Tennessee River, because that was their most important natural asset. And you know what was interesting about their process, they didn't pick the biggest project first or the hardest project first, they picked the smallest project first. Because they knew that nothing succeeds like success. So they took that one building and they restored it. And then, you know, somebody restored another building, then another building, then another building. Then they started doing bigger projects like that. And then, you know, they decided that they were going to try to preserve the Tennessee River Gorge. They set up the first land trust in Tennessee, the Tennessee River Gorge Trust, and preserved all of the land you see there. And then they decided to build a park with a trail all along the Tennessee River for 13 miles. And the original price tag on that park was pretty expensive. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, we just can't afford that. But, you know, how much something costs is not the most important question. It's the second most important question. The most important question facing Knoxville, Tennessee, and any other American city is, what should we do? What should we do? And as it turned out, money always follows good ideas, particularly if those ideas come out of a consensus-building process. And they built that park, and it's attracted almost $1 billion in new investment directly adjacent to it. You know, and they were able to do pretty remarkable things, like the Walnut Street Bridge, which the Tennessee DOT was going to tear down and had set aside millions of dollars to demolish. They said, no, we have a better idea. Let us turn it into the nation's longest pedestrian bridge. It now connects the Tennessee River Park on one side of the river with the other side. Welcome to a small town example, Susan City, California. 1980, it was voted the worst place to live in Northern California. This was their city hall. It was in 2 double-wide trailers. This was the only city hall in California you had to register with the Department of Motor Vehicles. But, you know, public buildings are actually kind of important. And before, you know, World War II, they were always our most beautiful buildings, whether it was the courthouse, the library, the public school, you name it, and they were always downtown. And then, starting in about 1960, we decided cheaper was better. And you know what we've learned about that? We've learned that cheaper is simply cheaper. And so what they said to themselves in Susan City, California, is they said, why would anybody invest in a community that wouldn't invest in itself? So they said, we need to set the standard. So they built a new city hall right on that same spot. And that began a decade-long transformation. And in 1990, they were voted one of the best places to live in Northern California. But it all began with an investment in themselves. Let me show you a closer-to-home example. Welcome to Port Royal, South Carolina. A little town outside the Parris Island Marine Corps Base. And it was going no place. This was their city hall. Okay? But they said the same thing. Why would anybody invest in a community that wouldn't invest in itself? So let me show you their new city hall right on that same spot. Okay, and this caught the attention of a developer who decided he wanted to build some downtown housing for the first time ever. And he extended the street grid of the town into a piece of vacant land. And then he went to a local architect and said, could you design some new houses for me that look like old South Carolina houses? And they built those houses, 41 of them,
They all sold in less than 6 months, and these 41 houses changed this town forever for the better. And because now we had 41 new families living in town, everything started to change. So this was downtown Fort Royal. It was just like one boarded up, empty, vacant building after another. But now we have 41 new families living downtown. They start to look at every building as an opportunity. And so they start restoring them. And then the school board decides that the school is undersized now because we have all these new families. And they say, well, we got to tear the school down. We're going to move out and build a new school out on the Strip. But of course, none of the kids would be able to walk to school out there. So the new community said, well, why don't you keep the school downtown and let's build an addition on it. And they go, oh, never thought of that. So they put a new addition on the school. Now every child walks to school. And then the post office said, well, we're too small too. We got to move out to the Strip. And the community said, no, we want you downtown. The post office belongs downtown. We'll find you a piece of land. And when we do, you're going to build us one of the best looking small town post offices in America. And they did that because they had a vision for the future. Successful communities inventory their assets, educational, economic, natural, cultural, you name it. Sometimes the assets are very obvious. Welcome to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. World-class scenery, unparalleled wildlife resources. Or how about Annapolis, Maryland? Incredible architectural and historic legacy. Sometimes the assets are not very obvious. Welcome to Lowell, Massachusetts. In 1975, it was a dying industrial city that had an unemployment rate of 27%. It had never seen a single tourist and it thought it had no assets. But what it had was good leadership. And it had a lot of abandoned textile mills, and they've restored them all today. And today, this is the Charleston, South Carolina of New England. Today, they get 1 million tourists a year. Today, they've restored literally dozens of historic mill buildings for every use you can think of. Condominiums, workforce housing, affordable housing, rental units, luxury housing. The University of Massachusetts restored 11 warehouse buildings in downtown Lowell after they created their vision. A couple of other examples. How about the torpedo factory in Alexandria, Virginia? Okay, now the single most successful arts center in the United States. Or how about Paducah, Kentucky? You know, dying community on the Ohio River. They turned not only their flood walls into an art gallery, they created the Lower Downtown Arts District. They offered houses to artists for $1 in exchange for restoring those houses. They've had 130 artists move to the city and restore 130 houses and investing millions of dollars in the process. Rapid City, South Dakota. This was their downtown, dying because they tore down all their buildings, replaced them with parking. Now they replaced the parking with a new town center, which is bringing the town back to life. Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, their old foundry, now is their visitor center, convention center, cafe and coffee shop. The High Bridge in Poughkeepsie, New York. Some of you may have heard of the High Line in New York City, an elevated railroad line 23 feet above the streets of New York. Well, this is the small town example of that, Poughkeepsie, New York. That's called the High Bridge. That's 275 feet above the Hudson River. That bridge closed in 1973. And it sat there abandoned until the state of New York decided it was time to tear it down. And then the community got together and raised $68 million to turn it into the High Bridge State Park. Now they get, in this little town of Poughkeepsie, New York, 600,000 people a year coming to the town to walk across the Hudson, 275 feet above the river. Successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives. Why do we educate? In order to reduce the need to regulate. Why do we educate? Because people won't embrace what they don't understand. Why do we educate? Because the people of Knoxville have a right to choose the future, but also to know what the choices are. We need to use carrots, not just sticks. Show you an example, 2 examples of incentives. So here's one. This is the Lone Star Brewery in San Antonio. It's sat vacant for 20 years until we used an historic preservation tax credit to turn it into a world-class museum of art. Or how about, in Yazoo City, Mississippi, where all they did was offer the owners of downtown businesses free paint to repaint their buildings, and look what happened. Okay? A little dying downtown has come back to life with just a small incentive to create interest and buzz about the character of their downtown.
Successful communities cooperate with their neighbors for mutual benefit. You spend all your time fighting between your counties and so on, you're not going to be very successful. Successful communities cooperate with each other. Great example, the Research Triangle. Here was a region where all the young people used to leave. It was built around 3 dying industries: tobacco, textiles, furniture. But they had 3 great universities, and they decided to create collaboration between 3 communities: Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, to create the largest research park in the United States. And by the way, they've just finished a new master plan for the research park. For the first time, it will bring housing into the research park, and the first time it will bring retail and restaurants into the research park. Because their biggest problem now is traffic congestion. Because when they planned it, it was state-of-the-art in the 70s, but it was all single use. That doesn't work anymore. Successful communities cooperate. Successful communities pick and choose among development proposals. All development is not created equal. You think this would be better for your community to have a movie theater that sits vacant 90% of the time because people only go to the movies at night and on the weekends? Or would it be better to bring the movie theater back downtown where, you can actually have shared parking? And by the way, restaurants follow movie theaters. Retail follows